Hello and welcome to Everfree Radio. My name is Brushin Bones and I will be your host today. Together with me today we have Crescendo.
Hey there.
We have Dpad Pony.
Hello.
And we have Ramble.
Hello.
Today we are doing the episode review for Season 3, Episode 12, Games Ponies Play, which runs parallel to last week's episode Just for Sidekicks, where Spike attempted to weasel his way into getting more gems for a cake, while everybody goes to prep the Crystal Empire for the oncoming Equestrian Games. So in this episode, we follow the main six, led by Twilight Sparkle, back to the Crystal Empire, where they hope to help Princess Cadence prepare the entirety of the city for the Equestrian Games. The Games Inspector will be coming and doing an inspection, as the title implies, to see whether or not the Crystal Empire is fit to host these Equestrian Games, which I suppose are basically the pony version of the Olympics. And so, Twilight Sparkle and all of her friends have a lot of work cut out for them, getting the city completely on the up and up, and preparing the absolute best reception for the Games Inspector as possible. Of course, things start to go wrong when they get there, and it's one problem after the next. They go to the train station to find the Games Inspector and give them a full-on tour of the city, only to find out, long after everything else and hijinks have ensued, that they've got the wrong person. But all is well when at the end of the episode they encounter the real Games Inspector, and after giving an honest recount of all of the troubles that have gone throughout the day and everything else, the Games Inspector gives them the okay to host the Equestrian Games there at the Crystal Empire, and the episode ends with them hopping on the train back to Ponyville. And we get a nice little shot of all of the people involved in last week's episode hiding under the seats. So, first things first with this episode. What did you guys think of them doing the whole parallel thing, where last week we got to see the entirety of what was going on during this time from Spike and the pets and the Cutie Mark Crusaders' point of view? Now we get to see the other end of that spectrum, what was going on with Twilight Sparkle. What did you guys think of that?
It's an interesting concept. It's akin to almost having a double episode without actually having a double episode. And it's always nice to see the other end of the coin, like what the other people are doing when events are taking place. Like, for instance, episodes where we only see half of the main six, it would be nice to see what the other half are doing, if they were doing anything interesting. So that's why I really like that concept of this episode.
Yeah, I did too. It's nice to have something where it runs parallel, where contingency matters a little bit. You know, nice to see them taking into account. However, the episode did kind of fall into a little bit of a trope, but you saw the episode, you know, how it was going to end from pretty early on, but they managed to make it enjoyable. I enjoyed it.
Aside from the scene right at the beginning, which honestly caught me off guard, I was thinking, wait, haven't I seen this episode before? And then the scene at the end of at the train station on the train back, there's really no overlap because they take place in two completely different locations. For me, it seems like a bit of a wasted premise there. I mean, when I heard that this is what they were going to be doing with the episode, I envisioned almost more of a Back to the Future 2, where you have the events of one episode taking place within the events of another episode, and they really didn't do that. So aside from the immediate beginning before they head off to the Crystal Empire, and then when they're in the train station on the way back, the episodes might as well take place during completely different times. So for me, it seems like it was a good idea, but they really didn't use it at all.
You don't think they utilized it to the full potential?
No.
Well, what you have to take into account is, yeah, they may not feel like they took place at the same time. Spike's group never actually got seen or heard of by the main six.
And they didn't even show up to the Crystal Empire until very nearly, the latter portion of them being in the Crystal Empire and at the train station was at the very last minute in this episode, and it was the latter portion of last week's episode. So there really wasn't all that much overlap between the characters relative to the setting, because most of last week's episode was spent in Ponyville. All of this week's episode, except for that first scene at the beginning, was spent at the Crystal Empire. So, I mean, you're not really going to have the same sort of situation as like with Back to the Future 2.
Long story short, there wasn't really much room for interaction between the two.
Exactly.
One quick point on that. A lot of people are saying, just for sidekicks, it was a lot of hijinks and whatnot going on. And small change, instead of ending up on the train that arrives when they're on their way back, if one of the animals had, like Angel had run after Fluttershy at the beginning, got on their train, and then you have this thing where Spike is trying to
keep them hidden the entire time while all of them are in the Crystal Empire.
Exactly, and then you could have seen one side of the scenes in this episode, and you could have seen kind of the other side in this week, and I think that would have been a better use. And it's not a huge change to the storyline of Just for Sidekicks, it's just where it takes place.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I see. Okay, so now the real meat of this episode comes from the general trope of a misunderstanding that leads to hijinks, essentially. We'll continue to use that word. That's a fun word, hijinks. Now, the misunderstanding in this episode is, of course, that the girls were told that the games inspector would be the pony with the flower print luggage. And they see a pony with flower print luggage, immediately assume it's the games inspector, and they spend the entirety of their tour misinformed. So, what did you think of that whole thing? The use of the misunderstanding?
I thought it was, entertaining because, I kind of figured first off because of her chicken Cutie Mark that, there was a case of mistaken identity that, and they were avoiding using names pretty rampantly. And, I thought it was kind of funny because the dialogue from, what did they decide her name was? Miss Peachbottom? I can't quite remember. That's the name I've seen floating around on the social networks.
Honestly, I think the pony that was misidentified as the games inspector was actually credited as games inspector. And then Miss Harshwinny was the actual games inspector because the girls refer to the games inspector as Miss Harshwinny.
Right.
But they never name the one that they mistake for Miss Harshwinny.
Nope.
In the credits, I do remember that there were two different credits, one for Miss Harshwinny and one for Games Inspector.
Huh. That's interesting.
Or maybe she was secretly the games inspector all along.
Perhaps.
Conspiracy theories, pony style.
Tinfoil hat, aho!
Hey, don't mess with the tinfoil hat. I've got one.
So, sorry to interrupt there, though, Dpad, so go ahead and finish what you were saying.
I thought it was funny, just given her character, the games, she was pretty far from a games inspector, considering she had a bit of claustrophobia when she was getting a tour of the castle, and a little bit disruptive when they finally took her out to the big sporting arena. Although she was a very interesting character, a little bit of a hayseed, but it was actually, the dialogue was pretty funny.
Okay, cool. What about you, Crescendo?
Honestly, you saw it coming, but in my opinion, at the very least, I don't feel that really detracted from it, because it was just one whole series of cringe-worthy events. It's like, oh god, this isn't the right character, but they're gonna continue anyway. And I actually found it really humorous. It was one of the biggest bits of the episode for me. I did enjoy the whole reactions between the characters and the so-called inspector. As for who they think is the inspector's character, I quite like that. It was interesting to see a pony with claustrophobia, albeit on a very grand scale, to the point where as soon as she looks up at the ceiling, she needs to get out again. All in all, it was a very interesting concept to me.
Well, didn't she say she was like a wild Mustang and really didn't like being, contained?
I think there was something like that.
Yeah, Mustangia or something. I can't remember the name of the place that they mentioned.
What about you, Ramble? What was your opinion on the whole misunderstanding?
When they introduce themselves at the train station and they're not using names, right off the bat that it's this huge misunderstanding. And I kind of put my head in my hands because I was like, all right, this is the episode we're in for. I knew there's not going to be any surprises. There's not going to be any twists. It's, stock Saturday morning cartoon plot number 73. What bothers me is not that, okay, we've seen this story before, it's that it's such a weak premise. It's a plot that only exists because nobody says who they are. That's it. Nobody says who they are. You look at It's About Time. Twilight isn't going to know, oh, there's absolutely no problem. I brought all of this stuff on myself, because she tries. Okay, I'm going to try to avoid it by preparing everything. Well, that didn't work. I'm going to try it by standing still. Well, that didn't work. she's trying to avoid this situation, and it is her worry, but it's not like one of the characters can just pipe up and say, oh no, there's a mistake. And that's exactly what this story is. If the games inspector at any time said who she was, like, oh, I can't believe you went through all this trouble for just me, and then the characters are doing, like, Rainbow Dash is doing all these justifications, like, oh, she's acting strange. Well, she must have been trying to test us. Nobody questions it, and that's the thing that really bothers me, is that it's a plot that hangs by a thread that at any time can just, unravel, and everybody knows what's going on. And it's going to run just long enough to get you up to 20-odd minutes of story, and then you have your denouement, and everything ends up wrapped up. And that kind of bothered me, because you know exactly what's happening from stage one.
I see. I can sort of see where you're coming from, mostly just because the entire situation could have been avoided if, rather than telling them, look for the pony with the flower print luggage, if they would have just said, look for the pony with this cutie mark. Since, cutie marks are a pretty easy way of identifying ponies in the Friendship is Magic universe, and it's a much more, you can't be guaranteed that nobody else on the train is going to have flower print luggage. But all in all, sure, you might think that it's been a very prominent trope, especially in children's cartoons or anything like that. All things considered, I think mostly at this point, we've got a couple of episodes to kind of get us to the ending, and then it's really going to be the next episode that's going to be a big thing for everyone. It kind of feels like they're just killing time till the season finale at this point. And this episode had some good bits here and there too. Some good jokes on the part of everything else, and some good minor little things like everybody's going on because there's a huge bit of spotlight stealing just from the beginning of the episode because of Rainbow Dash's desire to see the equestrian games, because Cloudsdale never got to host them, and we got the little flashback sequence where we see who is either A, her dad, or B, older brother, something like that, some family member. Majority of the fandom, I think, is figuring that it's probably supposed to be her dad, but we see this rainbow-maned stallion with her waving a little flag on his head, and that kind of stole the spotlight a bit there, and there were plenty of little silly bits, so I think mostly the plot was pretty forgettable, but it was still an alright and enjoyable episode despite that.
There are two things you have to take into account. First of all, the plot isn't always about the reveal, it's about the journey getting there. Knowing what happens doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a bad journey.
Yeah.
Secondly, under the immense stress of trying to win the hosting of the Equestria Games, you might go ahead and, forget a little detail that Cutie Marks are unique, and you go with whatever first pops into your head.
I can definitely think about that, but it does still seem a little weird that the one detail that anybody remembered about the games inspector was, look for the pony with flower print luggage. But I found the episode to be humorous, although some of the events that are caused from the misunderstanding were pretty head-bangingly obvious that if anybody actually bothered to stop and ask questions, that it could have been resolved earlier. But, it's a cartoon, so at this point you just kind of gotta go, they'll figure it out eventually. Okay, so when it comes to the little things, like I mentioned earlier, Rainbow Dash's dad and whoever in the little flashback and stuff like that, you get a bunch of little jokes like the royal hairdresser getting a cold, so Rarity has to try and assist Princess Cadence in creating whatever the heck that royal hairstyle is that the ruler of the Crystal Empire is supposed to have, and there's the freaking list of instructions as long as a tapestry. What did you guys think of all of the little jokes and stuff like that? And do they kind of save this episode from mediocrity or cliche as far as, what Ramble was talking about?
Regardless of that, I enjoyed the episode anyway. But I do think the little jokes and, I did especially like the hairdressing thing, because seeing Cadence's hair in such a horrific monstrosity, that was brilliant. And I just think it adds to the episode, like in every other episode of this show, really.
What I thought, was interesting was, if you pay attention, like early on in the episode, Cadence mentions to Twilight that she needs to kind of relax a little bit, if you'll recall, and then through the rest of the episode, she's got, that weird thing where she, tries to she does the funny, arm wave or whatever that is. Now, what I thought was interesting was they're taking a character who's known for having these monumental freakouts over, seemingly little things or even big things, but to a monumental level, she's actually caught on fire on one occasion, and they're trying to have her grow as a character. And I thought that was an interesting move, to have, somebody to take somebody's, kind of prime, character flaw, I guess, but, and actively trying to work on it in, a very highly tropic episode.
I could actually agree with that point, especially since it kind of helps to improve the connection that we're supposed to believe that Cadence and Twilight have. I especially like that they're continuing to do the whole thing that whenever Cadence and Twilight see each other, they do the whole sunshine, sunshine, ladybugs awake dance. And the whole Cadence, who was her full sitter and stuff like that, showing her, hey, you're getting upset, breathe in, breathe out, wave your arm, wave your foreleg outwards, that whole thing seemed like a pretty, that was a good way of connecting the two of them. And it kind of makes sense, too, because it's like Twilight gets off on her own outside of Canterlot, and she's very harsh, always jumping to anger or getting really, really upset or worried or paranoid over the tiny things, and showing that disconnect is what kind of made her that way, and her being back in Cadence's proximity kind of helps with that. Was interesting. Ramble, what about you?
There were a lot of little moments in the episode that just really stood out and made the episode less cliche. But for me, this episode, it was all about the B story. It was all about the rarity and the hairstyle. And anytime we went back to that plot, I was just like, yes, partially because, it's great little comic relief. There's lots of visual stuff going on, but I don't think Rarity's had her own episode. Like an episode where she's really been the focus this season. And so this is kind of Rarity's moment. Rarity gets the B story all to herself. And it's Rarity doing what she does best, which is, over-the-top dramatic stuff. Like when Twilight wants to see how everything's going and Rarity's keeping her from seeing the princess. And she's like, please, I will bring her back from the brink of tragedy, but you have to buy me some time. There's no other way. It's a haircut, but, hairstyle. But, I love when her character does that kind of thing. It's so entertaining to watch, especially over something like a hairstyle. I don't know. It's her gag. But for me, that was the highlight of the episode. It's simple, but it's the character doing what they do best, and it's entertaining.
I would probably agree with that being the highlight of the episode, especially since when you think about it, there's really no need for them to get the hairstyle 100% accurate. In fact, they probably didn't have to even go through with the whole hairstyle thing just on account of the fact that the Crystal Empire has been gone for 1,000 years. Nobody even knew it existed until recently, and it's a new thing. And so odds are nobody would have known or even understood the meaning of this special hairstyle anyway. So all of this effort to get this hairstyle totally perfect and all of the melodrama that's resulting because of it is twice as hilarious because there's no need for it. There is no need for it whatsoever.
I believe you're wrong. I do recall
they mentioned that the games inspector will have brushed up on her research and everything.
Exactly.
But when we had the initial thing with the Crystal Empire and stuff like that in the premiere, everyone, even the main six, were reacted when they were told, like, you gotta go to the Crystal Empire. Like, everyone was like, what's the Crystal Empire? There aren't any books on that. I've never heard of this. They should have given us, like, an idea of how much time's passed since the Crystal Empire came permanently back into being after Sombra's defeat between then and this episode, because you're kind of left wondering, well, just how much information would the games inspector actually have access to regarding the Crystal Empire if it was gone for 1,000 years and has only been around again for, a few months or whatever.
And just one side note, because you were saying they could have used the Cutie Mark to identify the games inspector. I know this has been brought up before, but on the train, after the train comes to a stop and all the main six end up kind of sprawled everywhere, you guys saw Fluttershy's Cutie Mark, yes?
Yeah, I saw that, the little error.
Yeah, there were a lot of jokes about her Cutie Mark becoming Twilight Sparkles when she hits the wall.
Yeah.
For something that they don't draw attention to and is that subtle, everyone's like, "Oh my god, this is related to, the season finale," and it had to be a like an animation error or something, right?
It was definitely an animation error. There was no way that was actually supposed to be related to the season finale. And it's not the first time that they've goofed up, especially when it comes to Cutie Marks.
Just as Brown says, mistakes happen. Whether they be of human hand or computer hand, they still happen.
I don't know, I think the errors give the show a little bit of its charm. It's kind of funny to see it.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to be specific, it'd probably be a robot hand, but...
Yeah.
The errors do give the show a lot of its charm, and they're pretty funny. And, I think that all in all, even if it is just an error, it still made everyone laugh. And in the long run, that's kind of what's important, is the entertainment factor here.
Yeah, it's like how people were talking about how one of the stylists there looked a little too much like Bon Bon.
I definitely think the errors are what spawn, quite a few of the memes.
Yeah, the errors are what spawned quite a lot of the memes, I've noticed. And in regards to the Bon Bon thing, it's like, this isn't the first time that a background pony is a recolor. And most of the background ponies are recolors or similar looking to another one. Heck, I'm pretty certain I saw that pony that I was talking about before who has Bon Bon's hairstyle, but I think it was Bon Bon's hairstyle, but Lyra's Cutie Mark somewhere in here.
To be fair, when you're an animator, you don't really want to spend hundreds upon hundreds of hours making individual unique characters, considering the fact they do kind of have a deadline.
Well, yeah, and that's why we get lots of those, long shots that people have screen capped and showed, hey, look, there's 3 or 4 different groups of Lyra and Bon Bon in this scene. That happens, and shortcuts need to be taken to save time and money on production, all that sort of thing here and there.
But by no means is it a bad thing.
No, it's kind of funny. Isn't that how we got Derpy out of this?
Yeah, the whole idea was literally just an error that turned into a joke. So, running gag, and everybody knows how popular that got, so... What did you guys think about the lack of a song the past 2 episodes? I've noticed that there have been a couple of people in the fandom saying that they kind of wish there would have been a few more songs here and there. And the song, when it comes to certain things like Ramble was talking about earlier, that this was kind of a cliched plot here where we had the whole thing based on the misunderstanding and them getting the wrong person thinking she's the games inspector. One of the things that people really loved about One Bad Apple was the song in that one, and that really helped to save the episode for people like me. People give me a lot of flack for calling that episode cliche, but I still gave it a good score. I gave it a 4 out of 5, and a lot of that was based on just the hijinks and the song. The song was really, really good in that episode, and so do you guys think that maybe this episode, or even Just for Sidekicks, could have used a song to bring out a bit more, give it a bit more oomph?
Well, 2 things. Firstly, Just for Sidekicks had a little bit of a song. Spike started singing a little at the very beginning of it.
Yeah, a little bit.
But secondly, I think Season 2 spoiled us for songs a little. It got us used to having songs every few episodes, and now that we've been, quite scarce on songs this season because it's a shorter season, I think, yeah, we're a bit spoiled for songs. But I don't think the songs make the episode by any means. And by no means am I saying the songs aren't enjoyable. Of course not. I love them. But I don't think we need a song to make an episode.
Yeah, I'm with Crescendo on this. I mean, would a song have helped? Yes. Do songs normally help out with episodes? Yes. Although, certain songs have been, if it's not a good song, it can kind of make or break the episode. Personally, I think Raise This Barn is one of the weaker songs that we've seen in Season 3. But I mean, the episode was still enjoyable. And, a song would have helped, but I don't really know where they would really fit it in with the way the plot was going. It was kind of lopped in as a work song in Apple Family Reunion. And, kind of iffy, but, still good as far as, songs go. But, yeah, I mean, I still think the episode was fine.
And what about you, Ramble? What do you think?
I loved the song of this episode. I mean, when they sang 2793, the place that we all want to be, that, that cements... No, okay, maybe I'll be serious here.
Yeah, be serious.
Yeah, that was actually pretty funny.
Come on. Well, aside from the little chant they have, I don't think this episode really would have fit with the song, because it's about the characters trying to have this welcoming for the games inspector, and I know that they got talented people working on the show, doing the songs, doing the lyrics, but how do you make a song about holding a welcoming for a games inspector? Although, actually, I guess they could have done like a really grand number akin to Winter Wrap-Up, where they're singing about bringing the games to the Crystal Empire, and that would have been kind of cool.
I can see where you're coming from there, definitely. And I gotta agree. I don't think that there was much call for a song in this episode. There might have been a couple of ways they could have gotten something like a song in there that didn't have to deal specifically with the games inspector. Like, for example, we got the art of the dress back in season 1 when Rarity was doing the dressmaking for the gala. Perhaps we could have gotten a Rarity song regarding the hairstyle and trying to save some modicum of decency from what is turning out to be a total disaster. But aside from that, I would probably agree and say that I don't know if I could necessarily have seen a song in this episode. But it would have been fun. Songs are always fun. I gotta agree that Crescendo, that we've probably been spoiled for songs because of the sheer number of them in season 2. Alright, so with all of that said, I think it's probably just best we move on to scores, since there really wasn't too much to speak about with this episode. Misunderstanding, hijinks ensue, rarities, melodramatic, that sort of thing. So we'll go ahead and move on to the scores. We'll go ahead and start with Crescendo. Crescendo, what would you give for this episode?
I quite enjoyed this episode. It wasn't one of the best episodes, but it certainly wasn't one of the worst either. Very enjoyable, albeit a very easy to figure out plot. I'm gonna have to give it a 4 out of 5.
Okay, and Dpad, what about you?
Well, I did enjoy the episode, considering it was fairly tropic, and I mean, Pinkie Pie did have a couple of good lines. That's also something I look for. I'm a pretty big Pinkie Pie fan myself. She didn't get too much screen time, but still had a couple of memorable moments. I enjoyed it. I mean, it wasn't anything very memorable. I mean, it's a 3 out of 5 for me.
Okay. And Ramble?
Well, like I said before, the main plot is a little weak. I really loved the Beast story, though, just Rarity doing what she does best. I like that we had Cadence and Shining Armor again, because just seeing the interactions with Twilight and Cadence, or Twilight and her brother, you don't really get that in a lot of other episodes. You don't really have the opportunity for that, because the characters live in different places. And so I think that that's something that, it's not much, but it's something we don't really get to see in another episode, so we get the opportunity to enjoy it here. We get to see characters we wouldn't be able to see otherwise. I don't think that the plot was weak, really, as much as it was just, we've had some really clever stories, and this one I think was just a little too much by the book. All the other elements were there. Great animation as always. There's some fun little gags, some great little expressions, like when the games inspector's hitting on Shining Armor, just the face that he makes is just awesome. And overall, I enjoyed it, but the main plot was a little weak. I'd say 3.5 out of 5.
I would say that, all things considered, for my own score, I'd say it's the little things that save this episode for me. I think that the main plot dealing with the misunderstanding and stuff like that wasn't all that interesting, but the B plot with Rarity trying to do the hairstyle was very interesting to me as well. And the main plot did manage to be the keystone for a lot of other little jokes and stuff like that. And the flashback and Rainbow Dash's obsession with making this successful so that the Equestrian Games can be at the Crystal Empire, because Cloudsdale wasn't allowed to host the Equestrian Games that one year they were supposed to. And the little flashback, we see her dad or whatever, and we get the little bits here and there, really nice little pieces of character with Shining Armor and Twilight, and Princess Cadence and Twilight especially. The continuity was really great. Honestly, I'd say, regardless of the main plot, The entire episode had a lot of really great little jokes and hijinks and callbacks to continuity that really made it a lot of fun. So it's a 4 out of 5 for me. So, with all the scores being done, that brings us to the end of our review for today. Thank you for joining us here at Everfree Radio Presents on Everfree Network. I have been your host, Brushin Bones.
I'm Crescendo.
I'm Dpad.
And I'm Ramble.
And we will see you next time here at Everfree Network. Thanks for tuning in.